Good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in Charleston, but I'm really excited that I can use some of today's technology to bring you some information at the Technology Think Tank. And so timely it is to be doing a Technology Think Tank. I'm going to be talking today about how surveys have been impacted by technology and how we can use technology better to do surveys for families that we serve. So really leveraging the power of surveys and how we can see a clear return on our investment. So here we go. I feel like before we can even start thinking about surveys and the impact of technology, we really need to be thinking about how consumers are impacted by technology or what is impacting consumers' decision-making today. And most of it is related to technology. So technology in general, drones and different ways that we serve families and we can communicate with customers have changed. Sharing economy, if you think about the Ubers and the Airbnbs of today, this is a new world that consumers are living in, and it's impacting all of their buying decisions. And of course, this connected generation. Everybody is connected to everything every minute of the day because we have basically a supercomputer at our fingertips at any given moment. And these are all influences on today's consumer that have been in existence for years, right? For at least the last 5 years, and more technologies are being developed that are changing the way consumers behave, think about what they're going to purchase, and then make buying decisions. But just this year, as we all know, this other thing just jumped into this whole picture. So why and how consumers think and feel about what they buy and what they're even capable and able to purchase right now is totally impacted by the pandemic. And I think for most of us, we've been thrust into new technologies that we didn't necessarily have to use at the beginning of this year. And so now the question is, where do we go from here and what's going to happen next? Well, I think that one thing that we need to think about is where we've been and where we're going by evaluating where we are right now. And I love this slide that I'm sharing from my friend Rocky Ozaki, who has a consulting firm up in British Columbia. And he talks a lot about the workplace and how things have changed in the workplace. And he's been talking about it and researching it for years. And it just so happens that everything he's been talking about has, again, like with the pandemic, thrust us forward, right? So let's take a look at what he's been talking about and what he's been researching. There is a way of work that was kind of before, right? Neanderthal, we don't even need to get into that. But the legacy of work, what we've all known as work, has been, you do your 9 to 5, you put on your suit, you walk into the office, and then when you're done, you punch out and you leave. Traditionally, that's what most businesses have been. But all along, especially in the last probably decade, we've been thinking with machine learning and artificial intelligence, robotics, that, this fear that jobs are going to go away and robots and machines are going to take over. And what's going to happen, right? Well, COVID forced us into this place where maybe we have a hybrid of that going on, where we're not fully into robotics and we're not going into work anymore. But what is happening is that people are adapting and being made to adapt by working from home. This doesn't impact our profession so much because as funeral arrangers and cemetery people, we're actually still going to work and being essential workers. But for the majority of people out there, work is different. And how that's impacted people over the course of the last few months is that values have changed. People working from home now are seeing how there's an integration between their life at home and their life at work. And so they're valuing things a little bit more, like their health and their family and their freedom. And why do I mention this? Because if their values change about the way that they interact with work and the things that they do and their own identity, then it's going to change the way that they even think about things that they purchase. And consumers overall in the place after COVID will still be seeking that interaction, that balance between work and life, or that integration. They're also going to be seeking more human connection, which is really ironic because we haven't been able to do funerals that have a whole lot of human connection the way that we've known it. I keep hearing people ask, well, how can I, show family as much compassion and empathy and love if I can't hug them the way that I used to? And so we really need to be conscious of that. One other thing that I want to mention about technology, because it really all sets the tone for where we are, and again, where are we going to be in life after COVID-19, and how much of this is going to normalize in the way that we behave and make decisions. I like this statistic a lot, and Rocky shares this, that research proves that by 2030, that's only 10 years from now, by 2030, 70% of what we consume and how we consume it hasn't been invented yet. Think about that. So the technology that's coming is so rapid, at such a rapid disruptive pace, that we have no choice but to adapt, and really adapt as quickly as we've been forced to adapt in this past few months. So where does that put us? Let's take a step back. I love this quote, "Your customer's perception is your reality." Remember, we're talking about how do our customers think? How are consumers thinking and feeling right now about the way they make buying decisions? Well, whatever we think or feel about this quote, it's very much true. We might think, well, it doesn't really matter what they want. You know, this is how I've been running my business forever. But it actually does matter what they want. In fact, nothing matters more than what the customer thinks about an experience they're having, or about what they think you can offer them, than ever. Today, nowadays, what your customer thinks and what their perception is about how your business is operating and what you can offer them is the reality of your business. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you were doing last year or even at the beginning of this year, right? What matters is what your customers think. And why I think we all kind of know this. Social media has made a huge impact on this, right? I've got the three stars up there for a reason, right? Because social media nowadays, what people think, they now say, and they can share with the world. So social media can break or make your business's reputation. So let's dig into that a little bit. I'm going to kill you right now with a whole bunch of really cool statistics, but I think it's important to lay the foundation here. These are all very relevant, very new, 2019, 2020 statistics. So think about this, and I know we've been looking at them a lot over the last couple of years, but this is where we're at now. 97% of consumers use online media, and usually major search engines, but they use the online search to look for local businesses, specifically local. That's the question there. What are funeral homes? Local at best, right? That's what we're looking at. They're not looking globally to solve their problems when they're looking for a funeral. It's local. So you got to think almost everybody that you're talking to is looking online before they come to you. Shouldn't be a surprise. They're going to want 40 or more online reviews before they believe your business's rating. So it doesn't matter if you have 5 stars if you only have 20 reviews. It's just not credible to the consumer today. 3.3 is the minimum star rating for businesses for consumers to engage with them. So that's pretty good news, because most funeral homes that we encounter are doing, kind of in the 4, above the 4 level, because just generally we do a good job of serving families better than other industries. So that is a welcome number, but it's something to pay attention to. 85% of consumers think online reviews older than 3 months old are irrelevant. So you could have more than 40 reviews, but if they all came from 2019, they don't really matter too much right now. So you got to stay up on that game, and you got to make sure we're constantly getting those reviews in order to make sure our reputation is strong in the community. 73% of consumers value the written review over the star rating. How interesting is that? So star rating is something, but now consumers are getting smarter. They're digging in. They want details. Why is that the number? Do I really believe that number? I want to know what people are actually saying about this business before I'm going to trust it, right? 68% of consumers will leave a review if asked. I love this statistic. That means we just have to ask them. When we do a good job, we have an opportunity to grow those online reviews. And here's some impact of positive reviews. So 90% of buying decisions are influenced by positive reviews. So 90% of people are going to, okay, there's a lot of positive here. That makes an impact on me, right? Consumers are also willing to spend more money when you have excellent reviews. That's a really good number, right? And interestingly enough, 1-star increase, so going from a 3.5 to a 4.5, can lead to a 5 to 9% increase in revenue. So getting those numbers up is important. We're going to talk about how we can do that. So 95%, here's the negative impact. 94% of consumers say negative online reviews have convinced them to totally avoid a business. And I know I'm that way. If I see a couple negatives and it's just enough for me to go, why bother? There's plenty of other people out there. And then the last major impact of negative reviews is that 4 out of 5 people, this is really interesting, will change their minds about a recommended purchase, meaning somebody in their family or a friend or somebody that they know told them, you should really use them. They do a great job over there. But then they go online and they see a negative review, 80% of them are going to go, I know that my cousin said they were good, but I'm going to kind of go with those 45 people online who said that they weren't. So think about that. Who people trust and where they're getting their information to make their decisions is greatly impacted by what they're seeing online, right? Social proof, well, mass numbers, that's what is making an impact. So what does that tell us? 5 stars, Google reviews, these are the things that matter most, right? And you may be thinking, yeah, but it's not just about Google reviews, or it's not just about getting those 5-star ratings. I mean, I've got legacy clients. It doesn't matter. I get business. We've had a steady share of business, but let's look at where we actually do get our business. This is a study that we do based on tons of statistics we have from clients that we, over 1,400 clients that we have statistics on at our company. And we do an annual trends report. And for 2019, we always ask, and last year, here are the results back, where we ask, why did you choose this funeral home? And still, we do have a significant number of people who are choosing, especially on traditional burial, at need and pre-need, their families who've previously been served by that funeral home, or they had attended services at that funeral home in the past. High numbers. But here's where it gets interesting. When we turn to cremation, which we all know is trending upward, and we'll, probably we'll continue on that upward trend, are looking more at recommendations than they are being previously served. So your cremation consumer is first choosing because of recommendations. So to me, that's the trend that we need to be paying attention to. That's today's consumer, right? They're looking for recommendations. And if you look at the statistic from the last slide, it doesn't matter if it's coming from a friend, it needs to come from masses of people. So overall in 2019, previously served families, which really is kind of like, you better do a good job or else they're not coming back. And recommendations, which is you better do a good job or someone's not going to recommend you, are 61% of the reason that people are going to come use your business. And that's not changing. And I really love to point this out. If you're spending any money on print ads and doing advertisements like you did in the past, only 3% of people are coming to your business because you're spending that money. And so I love this quote from our friend John DeJulius, who's an expert at customer experience. He's got a consulting firm and he really is an authority on customer experience. He's an author of multiple books on the subject. And he says, love it. Advertising is the tax you pay for just being average. So let's not be average, let's be exceptional. And what does that mean? Well, it means we're looking for those 5-star reviews, right? So if we're average, we're not getting 5-star reviews and we have to pay that tax to try to figure out how to get more business. But if we're superior, if we are getting those reviews, people are sending business our way. This is not rocket science. Most of you know this already. So what does the 5-star review mean? It's very simple. It means people were happy, like delighted, even, beyond expectations with what you have done to service them. I like to equate the 3-star review with someone who's just satisfied. They're just simply content that you did the job you were supposed to do. And I love thinking about this when I ask people, how do you know you've done an excellent job for a family? And sometimes we say, we get letters from families, we get hugs, we get kudos, and some people do some sort of survey in some way where they get some good feedback, at least we really liked you, you did a good job. But most of the time people say, well, we had our huddle up after our services of the previous day or the previous week and nothing went wrong. And that's the barometer. Nothing went wrong. So to me, if just nothing went wrong, we're striving for 3 stars, maybe just satisfying the customer. And obviously a 1 star seems like a fail. So when you start thinking about a 5 star, it's kind of how a customer, a consumer, a family might see that, right? So I even look at it from, if you looked at it as grades, you'd go 5 stars is like an A, or you could be an average, you could be a C student, or you could be a, complete failure. And so really that 1 star means you really failed to meet your customers' expectations. That satisfied, that 3 star means you just met their expectations. And if you get a 5 star, it means you've exceeded their expectations. Again, not rocket science. I'm sure you all know this already. However, I make the point because the question here is, how do you exceed expectations? And how do you know if you're exceeding expectations? Well, it all comes back to what the customer expects, right? And so if you think about the consumer, we got to be thinking about, what do they want from the experience? How did we delight them? How do we know that whatever we did to service them was the thing that really went over the top? Well, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, I'm sure you know, says the number one thing that has made them successful by far is obsessive compulsive focus on the customer. Like many other, but him like no other, really invented Amazon invented the star system, right? Nobody was going to any online sites and shopping and putting ratings on products before Amazon came along. I mean, they literally invented this. And they did this to make sure that the products that they had the ability to sell to you and to deliver were the kind of products that you wanted, because he wanted to understand the customer. And so from there, this Amazon thing grew, right? This Amazon culture for everyone now. Everybody has to have a rating for every product, for every business, for every person they interact with. It's just a reality. And sorry, Jeff did this to us, but he did. It's a culture, and it's a customer-driven culture. So what does that mean? In order to exceed our customers' expectations, we have to know what our customers want. So our customers' experience is more important than anything we could possibly do. In 2015, marketing experts basically came out and said the most important thing we should be focused on right now is customer experience. That was 2015. They said customer experience is more important than any kind of advertising, even social media. And these marketing executives from all over the world predicted that by 2020, this year, customer experience would overtake all other marketing efforts as the most exciting business opportunity. Well, guess what? If you see in the little corner there, this was research that was done in 2018. So only 3 years after they made that prediction, and 2 years short of when the prediction was supposed to come true, marketing, creative, technology professionals all over the globe said that the most important or the most exciting business opportunity was customer experience. So everybody in every industry started focusing on customer experience. And I know when I'm on LinkedIn and looking at, the feed and the overload of content that's coming to me these days, a lot of it is about customer experience. Even you might not realize it, but that's exactly what a lot of it is saying, how do we improve that experience? And, and I think it's exciting that everybody's trying to get better. And why? Because businesses know that there's also a financial return. In fact, the stock market shows performance by our, what we call customer experience leaders and laggers. And the leaders outperform by droves the laggards. So the companies who I've identified as having very clear customer experience programs are generating more revenue, are outperforming in the stock market. They're just doing overall a better job because they're focused on the customer. Is that even a question? Think about it. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, they're not hurting in any way, right? Now, I've been talking about this for a couple of years. I'm going to be honest with you, because we've been engaged in customer experience programs for a while now. And I started sharing these 2018 statistics that Salesforce does. They do an annual report where they survey a whole bunch of consumers across the globe, and they ask, what do you expect? If we want to understand our customers, we need to know what their expectations are. Now, this is global, so it's not our industry specifically, but these are consumer expectations overall. And I won't go through this, but I've highlighted the one from 2008 that I was sharing before that I think is important, that 76% of consumers expect us to understand their needs. That's what we're talking about. Let's make sure we know what they need before we do anything else, right? How can we possibly think about how we're going to serve them if we don't know what they want to be served and how they want it to be served to them? Well, the new research from 2019, or the newer research, has some updates. The other information from 2018 hasn't changed much, but here are the highlights that I thought were pretty relevant, especially since we're in a technology think tank. I thought this was interesting. 84% of consumers say that the experience a company provides is as important as the products and services that it delivers. So, products don't matter as much as experience, or matter just as much as the experience itself. And that makes sense. You can go to a restaurant and have a great meal, but if the waiter was not so much fun, it changes the whole dynamic, and the dinner wasn't great, right? But when both of those things, when the ambiance and the waiter and the food and everything about the entire, the ease of getting in and not waiting, and the speed to which the food came back, all of that matters. The entire experience is important to the story, to the sentiment that the perception that the customer has about what that interaction was with that business. 75% of customers expect companies to use new technologies to improve their experiences. So we know technology exists. So why wouldn't we be using technology to make things better? And I find this happening regularly, just in general life, where I, go in and I'm trying to order something from a restaurant, or I'm in an application because I'm shopping for something, and I'm thinking, why do I have to pre-fill it? Why do I have to fill this information? Why didn't they make this automated? Because all the other sites I go to made it automated. The technology exists. And guess what? I'm measuring up that experience with your business to every other experiences I have with other businesses, because I know technology exists. So no longer do you have an excuse that, well, we don't really need to go there. That's just too fancy for us, or we don't need that technology. Yeah, you do, because if it exists, customers expect it. At least 75% of them do. So unless you don't care about 75% of the consumers out there, you better up your game overall when it comes to the way that you deliver services through technology, or the way you communicate with families. I'm going to skip down to the last two because I think those are pertinent as well. 73% say that one extraordinary experience raises their expectations for other companies. It's what I just said. If somebody, no matter what it is, it's a hotel, it's a restaurant, it's a retail store, if somebody does something incredible, and we hear stories about this all the time, where people go way out of their way, Ritz-Carlton and the Marriott, and they go out of their way to service a family, to make a memorable moment happen, that's the bar. It's no longer, well, they did the job. There's a higher bar as soon as one experience kind of changes the game for a customer. So, and then 62% of customers are open to the use of artificial intelligence to improve their experiences. I think that's interesting, because I think just, even a couple of years ago, people were afraid of artificial intelligence and spying and privacy. And I think that's still a thing, but 62% is a pretty big deal for people to say, I'm okay with you knowing some things about me, because the technology can find things about me without me knowing it, as long as you're doing it because you want to make my experiences better. And I think we're going to see that continue to grow. So Steve Jobs said, you got to start with the customer experience and work backward toward the technology. And for technology, really, you need to insert whatever it is that you service people with, right? So we start with the customer experience and we work backward into what products we deliver. We work backward into how we do our services. We work backward into how we personalize our funeral events. We work backward into how we meet with families, whether it's online or in person, and what technologies we make available to them. We start with the customer and what we think they're going to feel and think about the experience. So how do we do that? How do we know what they want? That's the question. How do we know what customers want? What do they expect? And more importantly, once we service them, do we know we've met their expectations, or do we just assume? We got to know what the voice of the customer is. And there's a lot of ways to measure the voice of the customer. There's focus groups. There are, social listening, meaning just paying attention to what people are saying online. There's interviewing customers after you meet with them. And then, of course, there's surveying. And yes, I'm getting to the point. We will get there in this presentation at some point. But the point is, however you do it, we need to be hearing the voice of the customer so we can be better understanding what they want. We can't just assume we know what they want. And we can't assume that we're meeting their expectations simply because nobody complained. And that's an important point. In fact, there's a couple studies. They're only a couple years old, but they're still very relevant. Bain & Company, which is a big research company, they actually invented the Net Promoter Score, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They interviewed 300 major organizations, and they asked those executives of those 300 organizations, how many think that you are delivering superior service, superior experiences to your customers? And 80% of them said, I am. But then they went and they asked 3,000 customers that same question about those businesses, and only 8%, only consumers only thought 8% were actually delivering superior services. There's definitely a gap in what we think we're delivering and what we're actually delivering based on the customer perception, which is our reality. Remember that quote, our customer perception is our reality. So let's get out of our heads and get back to what the customer thinks. So the other research that was also done, or the other study that I like, is this one about customer centricity, and this was done by Capgemini a couple years ago as well, and they interviewed 450 executives. They asked them, how many think you're customer centric? Again, 78% said we do. They asked 3,300 customers, only 18%. So numbers are a little bit closer together a year later, but there's still a huge gap in our perception of whether or not we're doing a good job or not. So what do we do about it? Well, customer surveys are still the leading method for truly understanding your customer. So that's what we're really talking about today, is what surveys we do, how do we do them, and why we do them. I would ask, how many of you had taken a survey or received an invitation to take a survey in the past month or week or day or two? And I'm not there, so maybe you can talk amongst yourself, but I'll share with you that for me, just in the past week, here's just a few of the things that popped up in my inbox or in a text message or from an app that I was using. And you could see I went to Target. Here's the AI, right? You know what I did in the past week? I went to Target. I bought some dance masks for my daughter because she needed those to go back to dance class. I had to finish services with my attorney, so she asked for a review. Bought some makeup for my daughter as well, and they're asking for some feedback on how that was. And then I ordered some pizza from DoorDash. Regardless of what it was, almost every experience, the business is asking me, what did you think? Why? Because once again, everybody wants to get that feedback. It's the most important thing we could do. And businesses know that customers don't necessarily tell us when they're unhappy. Most customers, in fact, 1 in 26, will just not say a thing. But they might say something to their friends and family. They might say something to strangers if they hear your business name and say, oh, I didn't really like them, or they didn't do a great job. So if we're not asking them, how do we know how they're really feeling? We make a lot of assumptions about whether or not we're doing a good job. And surveying customers and getting feedback from customers is vastly different from getting a Google review. It's really interesting because I was talking to a client who said, I'm just really concerned about Google reviews. I've been talking to my social media expert, and they said, we can boost those Google reviews. That's all that matters. And so he said, I think all I need is to get Google reviews. Surveys don't matter. I don't know that it matters if I understand all of the other things about a customer I might say about my business. I really just need more Google reviews. And he's on the right track, right? We do need more Google reviews. I just talked about that. We need to make sure that people are promoting our businesses. But Google reviews, social reviews are there to create social proof. Like I said, people want lots of evidence. They want high scores and lots of them in order to believe that your business is credible. So it's social proof. It's building up customer trust. It's positioning your business as the top performer. It's showing up at the top of the search engine, right? And to an extent, it's gauging customer experience. usually just positive or really negative, but it is to some extent giving you some feel for what the customer experience is, but it's not enough. You got to survey families in order to get specific answers to questions that you need to know in order to better run your business. You need qualitative, you need quantitative data so that you can spot trends and look at different behaviors, and the way those trends will start leading you into decisions about what customers really want in the future and how you need to think about innovating. Remember that Rocky Ozaki slide at the beginning of this? Things that we're going to be purchasing in 10 years haven't been invented yet. So how are we going to be adapting to that? We don't even know, because we don't know what the consumer wants. Well, let's start figuring that out by asking what the experience was now, and we can be forward thinking. So we need to measure and manage both your employee and your location performance if you have multiple funeral homes. And more importantly, surveys are private. So you could keep them private rather than be exposed to the world. And if that's the first interaction or conversation you have with your customers about how the experience went, it's not necessarily the right one, right? So I'm going to ask a question, and I wish I were there to ask and see what you think about this, but how many people think that it's possible for someone to give you satisfactory or more than satisfactory score and say, hey, I love this business, it's great, but I still wouldn't promote you? Do you have that experience? Do you ever go to a business and you go, hey, I loved it, it was a great experience, I had a great time, or I really enjoyed that, or their products were good, but I'm not going to spend my time promoting them, or I'm not going to give them a review online, I just either don't have the time or it didn't mean that much to me, right? This is the little dilemma of the difference between customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. So there are absolutely customers who could be satisfied but not loyal, meaning they're not necessarily going to promote your business. And that could be for a number of reasons. But I think the interesting one is that you can also have customers who are totally loyal even though they weren't satisfied. And what does that look like? So an example of that would be, I am a loyal Delta flyer. I love my medallion status. I love all the rewards that I get. I think they have great customer service and all their promotions, and I love where they fly, and I'm very happy with them. And there are certainly days when I'm really unhappy with them, and I will fill out a survey and I will tell them, I'm really unhappy about what just happened in this situation, and you left me stranded, and I was stuck, and when I got on the next flight, I lost my status, and I was, in the 40th row, and it was a very uncomfortable experience, and no one even said sorry. But I'm still going to promote you. I'm still going to tell people, yep, Delta's the right brand, and they're definitely the best airline out there. So why is that? It's because, we don't necessarily know everything about an experience that somebody had. And the other side of the coin, the question about somebody being satisfied, but they won't necessarily promote, I think it's really interesting, because it may come down to what happened at one point in the journey. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But I want to talk about how surveys do more than just a social review, or just that quick star review that you're seeing online. Surveys help you to listen to the overall customer experience and truly take in their feedback. They allow you to measure your staff's performance if you're asking the right questions about all of the interactions that the customer had with the people that work for you. You can really get some good information, especially over time, about what that performance really looks like. Because honestly, how many of us really do this? We say that, or you say that you are sitting in on arrangements, but how often do you really sit in on arrangements and make sure that every funeral arranger is doing it the way that you train them to, or the way that you expect it to be done, or the way that you believe every family should be treated? You don't necessarily, do you? That's just my guess. Because when we really dig into that, we find that most people don't. So how do we actually measure whether or not our people are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, or what we expect them to be doing, or more importantly, what the customer is expecting from them? It allows us to manage and assess our operational needs, or if we're asking the right questions about our facilities and our vehicles and just the amenities in general. It's going to help lean into, like, maybe that's where we determine where our capital expenses are next year, because this is what customers are telling us we need to change. It's also helping us to move the needle on those results. So when we can spot trends and we can see patterns in what customers are saying to us over time, then we know where we need to make those improvements, and we can actually start working toward making those improvements, and we'll be able to measure it when we take additional surveys as we move forward into the future after making those changes. And of course, surveys are allowing us to ask for more referrals and testimonials because we are moving the needle. We're asking people for their feedback, and when we get good feedback, we're saying, hey, can we share that with people? And there's no better way to collect that testimonial than knowing that we did a good job to begin with, and that the customer absolutely, their perception is that they agree. So let me talk a little bit about those journey points. So, there's a lot of touch points that we have with our customers, from online, through a website, maybe it's through any of your social media, maybe it's from a phone call, maybe it's from multiple phone calls, maybe it's your answering service. It's every employee and every interaction they have with every single employee that they were in communication with. So lots of ways that customers in their relationship with you, even for one arrangement and one service, are interacting with you and your business, right? But we really should try to focus on what are the key touch points where there's a good amount of relationship building that's happening in those key areas, and making sure that we're doing everything that we say we're doing in a way that is pleasing to the customer and really exceeding their expectations. So surveys measure all of the touch points along the journey, not just did we do a good job and were you satisfied with those services? It's, were you satisfied with the first call? Were you satisfied with the arrangement? Were you satisfied with the pricing and the contract? Were you satisfied with the gathering? Were you satisfied with the visitation, with the look of your loved one during the viewing? Were you satisfied with our aftercare and how we followed up with you? All of those things are measurable, and over time, think about how much more we can improve if we know what the customer thought about each of those experiences. So survey results provide metrics for improvement, and that's the key there. When we ask the right questions, when we really dig into those details, when we hit the touch points, we're able to analyze those results, spot the trends, resolve issues. And going back to the technology that we're talking about, especially in 10 years, how do we innovate? Meaning, how do we plan improvements, make them now, and plan for them in the future? What are we going to look like 5 years from now, 3 years from now, next year, based on what our customers are telling us? And when we're doing our surveying, again, because we're talking about all those touch points, we're talking about individuals in different roles within our organization having the ability to interact and understand what those metrics are. How many times do you know that you got an issue with somebody because they're not really performing, and you start to have a conversation and they go, yeah, but that was just that one family, or that's not really me, or that's not my problem, or that was just that week. But you don't have tangible evidence. You don't have the analytics to put in front of them and say, look, this is what you're doing. Even better, what if they had access to that information in real time as it's coming to them? Well, survey technology is already there. So if somebody takes a survey online and they're answering questions about what that arrangement was like with Michael, the funeral arranger, Michael's able to see those results as soon as somebody hits submit. And Michael should be concerned with, whether or not he's really empathizing with our families, whether he's learning and recognizing his own behavioral needs and where he needs to change in order to be better. Is he connecting his individual performance to the business expectations of his performance? If you get the right questions on the survey and he's getting the right results coming back, he's going to be driven to improve, and you don't even have to tell him, right? And more importantly, you have the evidence if you had to have a conversation. Then you think about another role, which would be the next level up. Maybe you have multiple locations and you have location managers. Those location managers are concerned about making sure that if a negative survey came in or a question was negative on just one question on that survey, they can follow up with the family or make sure that the funeral arranger follows up with that family. They can also coach the team, seeing where the shortfalls are, the shortcomings, and make sure that we're working towards making improvements in that particular area based on the customer's perception. and really just addressing gaps in the performance of individuals and in the operation overall. And then finally, if you're an owner or if you work for a larger organization and there's multiple levels here, the insights person, the upper executive level person, the owner, is able to identify and investigate larger issues, dig deep to understand what we really need to change. And like I said before, innovate, test, adopt new ways of doing things, just overseeing everything at a high level and being able to engage with staff and recognize them for give them kudos for getting perfect scores and getting good survey return back. So having an opportunity to give back those positive reviews, as well as talking about the negatives in order to make changes. So really important to think about how survey programs can impact every person in your organization in a very, very positive way if used correctly. And here's an example of scoring methods. And I want to take a moment, I'm going to talk about the different ways we can score in surveys, or the way that surveys are scored, and some of the most popular metrics. But I want to share a little bit something about, the use of a one question type survey like an NPS. Now, that's the slide that I showed you where I had multiple emails to me this past week of people asking me, tell me how I did. Most surveys stop at that. They say, how likely are you to recommend me to a friend or relative? Well, that's what we call a net promoter score, that one question. And while it's probably the most important question you could be asking, because it really leads to that, would you go online and tell people that I'm great? It's important. But again, it's not the only question. And I'm going to talk about the scoring on that. But here's what's important. Just recently, I had received a copy of an email that came to me from an executive who got a copy of a survey that was a net promoter. So the customer basically said, yeah, I would absolutely recommend you. You're doing a great job. However, deep down into the survey, there was a question that was related to something very specific that a funeral arranger had done. And the executive said, whoa, hey, great job. It looks like this was a good review, a good survey result, and the family was happy. However, how did this happen? Well, let me tell you, if you're only asking net promoter, or if you're only looking for a Google review, you're not going to get the how did that happen with that one not so positive particular issue. Because remember, somebody could be a promoter, be a loyalist like I am to Delta, even when something negative happens. But if you're not asking about the entire journey, you won't get those details, even from your best clients. So you have to ask. And remember, people are willing to share if asked. So dig into the details of every experience so that you can make improvements across the board. And the next time, you might not be so lucky with somebody giving you that net promoter of a 9 or 10, or saying, yes, I'd recommend you because that one thing happened. So maybe that pushes them into a passive 7 or 8 score. Like, I wouldn't really recommend you, but you did a pretty good job if it wasn't for this one thing, right? So the net promoter score is a very popular metric. It's a 0 to 10 score, basically saying, how likely are you to recommend? A 9 to 10 is someone who says, I am an ambassador, I'm a loyalist, I will go out and I will, tell the world that you are fantastic, you've exceeded my expectation. The passives are people who are kind of like the 3 stars. They're going like, I'm satisfied, you did the job, but you didn't, overwhelm me, right? And then your detractors, your 0 to 6 people, are basically saying, no, I would not recommend you because you did not do the job. You did not even meet my needs. And so an NPS score is basically taking the percentage of people who give you a promoter, and you subtract the percentage of people in all of the scores that come back that are detractors. And then you have this net promoter number. And it's a very important metric. And once you start doing surveys like this, then that percentage or that number actually starts making sense. But it's a very popular one. It's something I would suggest you consider looking into, and even Googling it and reading all about it. Like I said, Bain and Company are the people who invented it. So there's a lot of information from them about what that score means and how to use it. Another way of scoring surveys is when you ask questions. A lot of people ask, like, why would we not do a 4-point scale instead of a 5-point scale, even versus odd numbers? Well, any of the odd numbers, a 3-question or a 3-option survey, or a 5 or a 7-option survey, are called a Likert scale, invented by a scientist basically with the last name of Likert. And the mentality, the rationale behind a Likert scale is that if you give people options that are even, meaning 1 through 4, 1 and 2, or 3 and 4, you're basically asking them yes or no. You don't really get the really fun, meaty stuff in the middle. Like force somebody to say, I am just kind of neutral in the middle. Why? Because then you could start digging into that neutral and saying, how do I get you to move on to the 4 or 5? Or what pushed you over to the 1 or 2? It just forces a better decision, a decision that gives you a little bit more information about how they're really feeling, right? And so really the question is then, is it 3, 5, or 7? And typically you use a 7, a longer scale, because it's a bigger range for people who are more educated or more highly educated, and a 3 for people who are less educated. And so, it's probably safe to stay in that 5 range for most people. So a Likert scale with a 5-point scale system is probably the right place to be for our industry in general. And then you can measure that 5 scale all the time. The other reason I like it is because it pretty much matches up to the stars, doesn't it? So people are thinking in terms of 5 stars these days, so it makes a lot of sense to stick with the 5 options. Okay. So how do we survey people? What are the ways that we can send out surveys? Well, there's the old paper, and a lot of people are still mailing out postcards or surveys with 10 questions or 5 questions or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're asking the right questions. So I'll just give just a few like high level pieces of feedback. Obviously it's snail mail, so your return rate is going to be a little bit slower for it to go out and then to come back. Typically this is going to get you a better return rate in a traditional market, meaning maybe the older demographic, and maybe it could stand out a little bit more if you have the right branding on your envelope. People are more willing to open it up because they have a connection with you in your funeral home. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a positive because more people are not getting any paper mail anymore, or maybe it's the nice piece that comes in the middle of all those advertisements and newspaper circulars, and so it's kind of fun to open up something. I know I feel that way sometimes. Well, the next level or the other option for doing surveys nowadays is emailing a survey. It's digital, so you are going to get a quicker return, obviously. People could do it on their mobile phone if they get an email invitation and they use their email on their mobile phone. You can also do a very popular thing right now is a quick start question, meaning that Net Promoter Score question is embedded in the email. So as soon as they click on, how likely would you be to recommend, it takes them right into the survey. So it feels like a very easy experience to start taking the survey and kind of hooks them in. So you get real-time results. As soon as somebody takes that digital survey and hits submit, the results should come right back to you, which means you can respond a lot quicker than you could on paper if it was coming back in the snail mail, right? And who knows about the post office these days. So it is definitely better on a digital than a text message for people who are maybe moving out of the most traditional market and kind of like not quite yet into smartphones or don't use their smartphones as often or aren't texting as much. So that's a good transition. And then SMS, which is basically text messaging. And there's 2 ways of doing that. There's a one-way invitation and there's a 2-way conversation. So a one-way invitation means you're just going to send a text message which says, hey, would you be willing to take this survey? And it has a link to the survey. They click into it and they start taking it. Now I know you've been hearing this a lot, is that text messages get a way higher open rate, meaning people will click on and open it and see it. For sure, we're getting typically about an 80% open rate on the survey when people are seeing that come in through a text message. And the response rate is starting to trend higher than the other modes. Not fully there, and especially for our profession or our industry, we still do have more of a traditional client, so you have to think about the balance there. Now the future really is the 2-way conversation, meaning you ask a question in a text and you ask for them to respond back in the text. So the question would be, how likely are you to recommend our services to a family, a relative, or friend? Please text back 0 through 10. And then if the person receiving that text just texts back 9 and texts away and sends it, then automation would ask them the next question. This is really cool because it's interactive. You get real-time results. It's quick. It's simple. Customers are really more likely to answer because it's simple and quick, and it's kind of fun to have a conversation with a automated response. Sometimes, maybe. The only problem there is you can only ask about 2 or 3 questions because they're not going to keep having this conversation with you, right? Typically, a consumer will do 2 or 3 questions and then they max out. So this works really well if you're doing 2 or 3 questions. at every touch point along the journey. So maybe after you have the first call, you ask a couple, or arrangement, you ask a couple questions about the arrangement. And then you wait until after services. Maybe if they're even a month later, then you ask a couple questions about the services. But that's about the capacity. You're not going to do a whole lot more than that. So, I mean, just lots of options for methods for surveying. I'll tell you kind of where we sit on this. We know from a ton of research, and I'm going to point specifically to this one from Twilio. Twilio is a company that developers use to, help them get text messages and emails out to the masses in their programming, basically, as you're developing technologies and applications. And so basically they did some research. They had 2,500 consumers were asked and surveyed about how they prefer to be communicated with businesses. And 83% of consumers still prefer to receive communications from businesses over email, not text. But they do prefer text message if the communication is urgent. So I know what you're thinking. I hear this a lot. People say, yeah, but I text with my families all the time. Yes, because you're making funeral arrangements, and in their mind, that's urgent. But when you then go ask for them to give you feedback about your services, it isn't necessarily urgent. So it's just a point to think about. We're doing a lot of testing on this and seeing how this works out. I know that SEI has been doing email for 10 years now, and they're just converting over to text. So it took them a while to get there, but it's interesting that they are moving into text, and they've already piloted that and have started that last year. So that being said, regardless of the mode or the method that you use to send surveys out, let's talk a little bit about return rate or response rates. We know that one way to increase the response rate is when you ask, like we said, but it has to come from really all levels, and most importantly, owners and managers. Because if you're telling the family, we really would love your feedback because we want to do better. We want to improve our services. We want to know that our people are servicing you in the best way they can, and that we make improvements. So families that we, that we help in the future can benefit from your feedback. People are willing to give that feedback, especially for something as personal as the services that we do in the funeral service. And it's really important to act on that feedback. So, we know that responses increase when consumers see more dialogue happening. So what does that mean? It's like doing things like announcing that you made changes based on feedback. And you could do that in a newsletter, if you do a newsletter out to customers, or in your social media saying, hey, we listened and we heard that, families wanted us to, get a new coach, whatever it is. But we listened and we heard you. The fact that you're saying we listened and we heard and we made those changes would make consumers, families more willing to give you feedback in the future. So just keep that in mind. Not that we do a ton of like repeat business in a short period of time, but just building up that reputation of trust in your community says a lot. And if people even see that other feedback was given and they didn't provide feedback, they could come back and say, oh, I'm going to do that next time. Or I really believe that they want to make changes. That's powerful. So the more dialogue you have, the more engagement, the more powerful that whole experience is going to be, and the better your results over time. So that in mind, response rates vary by industry vastly and by how you're sending out those surveys. So you just got to figure out what's going to make best for your demographic, right? We talked about whether it's a more traditional demographic, or they're maybe younger and they use more mobile. And so really you got to feel that out. We know that for our industry, the average across the board is about 35% return rate or response rate on surveys. And in some cases we get 60 to 65% return rate. It all depends on how much effort we're putting in and how we're asking and what we're doing with that information to truly engage in it and want to make improvements. And another important note, this final note on responses, is that when you start to think about trends, people always ask, well, what if I don't get 35%? Well, you might not need 35%. If you do 1,000 calls, getting 10% is great. Why? Because we don't recognize a trend, or you shouldn't recognize a trend, until you get at least 75 to 100 people saying this. And so you get there by asking everybody, by just over time getting that qualitative and quantitative data to really understand this is really a thing that's happening, so you can make those improvements. So start a program, start working on, asking and getting feedback and understanding, and just load it all up, and then pay attention and see over time how sentiment changes. And if it doesn't change, what you need to do to make those changes. And maybe you don't need to make changes, but at least you can recognize over a period of time with a good amount of data, whether or not you have a trend or not, which tells you, maybe we should make a change. So just keep that in mind, that the percentage may not matter as much as the number of responses that you're getting, especially at the front end. Okay, so one of the last couple of things I want to touch on is just how doing digital surveys or doing surveys is going to help you promote those online reviews that I talked about at the very beginning, which is everything, right? We already said it, we need those Google reviews. So how do we leverage our survey results in order to get that? Well, we found this company, Medallia, and they're the leader in doing customer satisfaction surveys. In fact, they do 1 billion surveys every quarter. They listen to that much consumer information, so they really know their stuff. Well, here's what they've done. They've implemented a program where at the end of a digital survey, as soon as somebody submits the survey, a window pops up and asks the family, would you be willing to share this in Google reviews, Google specifically? And it takes that Net Promoter Score, converts it to a star rating, takes the sentiment about why they gave them that Net Promoter Score, and allows someone to post immediately. Well, you might say, well, why does that matter? Well, or does that really work? Or how does that work? Well, it's really simple. A family takes a survey and they've already spent the time to give you a whole bunch of sentiment. And then you say, hey, can you just click post? And guess what they do? They do to the tune of, here's a really great case study. And they did this with H&R Block within the first, from one tax season to the next, they did an increase in the number of reviews online by 26 times. So look at those numbers. They went in the 2018 tax season from 2,810 reviews online to 72,000 after they use that promote button. And they're seeing those results across the board by every company that's doing implementing that program. But I think this is really fascinating. Not only are they getting more reviews, but they're getting their scores higher. And I think, and the evidence shows that they are, when you ask a family about the entire journey and they're having to go through that entire experience and really contemplating what that is and sharing their feelings about it, they're more likely to realize what good experiences they were. So the scores went up, and probably because there's just more of them happening, they were able to go up, and probably because over the course of the year they made some changes. But nevertheless, asking more and doing more and analyzing more is going to get you better results. More results, better results. You just can't beat that, right? So we start talking about what's the value of doing surveys, or especially doing digital surveys. Well, let's look at it. The value of doing digital surveys specifically, because we're talking about a new technology here, is that you can measure real-time feedback, get quicker response time, resolving customer concerns, and providing feedback to your staff so that they can make improvements to their performance and you can make improvements to maybe your training programs. You're able to manage better your operation as a whole, make operational improvements, look at performance indicators, and again, train staff better, or train them in or train them out, right? And then increase your performance metrics. So looking at those scores, how do we improve the scores? Because when you improve those scores, what you're saying is we've improved the customer experience, which is, again, more important than anything. And then move the needle, promote more social reviews, drive new business results, new business, in those results, protecting your legacy business. So maybe people who would consider not coming back to you, even though they had in the past, because you have negative reviews, because remember those statistics at the front end, that happens. You want to protect those legacies by making sure you have lots of reviews and lots of positive reviews online, because they're not necessarily going to be loyal just because they've been here before. And then increasing your online review scores, not just, again, quantity and quality. And then I never talked about this, but think about it. Your employees are more engaged. They're more excited because they're working in an environment where people are, are really just working at high level of performance and focusing on the customer. So generally your employee net promoter score is improving too, meaning your employee is more willing to say, you should work here. It's a great place to work. And who doesn't want that? And so finally, the real return on investment in digital surveying. And this all depends on the metrics that you're taking in and what you decide that you're going to measure and track. But there is definitely enough research to show that when you do digital surveying and you do a comprehensive program and you do it right, you're going to improve your customer experience. You're going to increase the number of reviews and the number of referrals that you get, which is going to help you increase your overall market share and, more importantly, innovate so that you know where you're going in the future. And that, my friends, is priceless in this environment and the environment that we're going to be in for the next 10 years. And this co-founder of Medallia, Amy Pressman, she says, ultimately, the one sustainable customer advantage that a company can have is a culture that enables its people and the entire organization to learn faster. And we can't learn fast enough, and we can't know anything unless we ask. So, leveraging surveys, getting a true return on your investment is making sure that you have a comprehensive survey program, that you think about making it digital, and you think about taking the results and doing something proactive with them to make improvements in your business and make improvements to your entire organization. So I thank you. I really wish I could be there because technology is my passion at the moment. It has been for a while, and specifically with the changes that have been thrust upon us in this profession, I'm so excited for what's to come, and I'm so excited to answer any questions that you might have in the future. This presentation is in a PDF, so you should be getting a copy of it, but please, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any other thoughts, concerns, or you just want to share some customer experience stories. Those are always fun. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your time there at the Technology Think Tank.